Okay, so we will get started. So today I'll share a bit of our experience in the area of using digital twins in training board operators. So I'm work for BP and I'm based out in our office in the Naperville area. Just like everybody else now, many of us are working from home. So today I'm doing this presentation from home. So in terms of the talk that I'll take you through in the next 10, 20 minutes, we'll talk a bit more about plant operations, and then I'll move to a bit of the challenges that we face in training our staff, and then the use of the simulators, and then the role that the 3D models play in our effort, just to get everybody on the same basis of understanding the challenges. I thought that I'd give you a bit backgrounds of typically in a manufacturing facility, how do we actually run the operation. So for example, on the right hand side you see pictures of a refinery in the US, and you just see a lot of lights at night, but obviously there are a lot of connections to what we normally call a control room. So this snapshot here on the bottom left is a control room of a pretty modern refinery. This is actually for a refinery not based in the U.S., but was built in India for a company called Reliance. So it's one of the major refiners. So very modern, large flat screens and all that. And and you may be wondering, like, what are all these people doing inside this control room? And then do you have people working outside in the field, right? The answer is yes, we have many people, in a day-to-day operations. We have many, what we call them outside operator that will walk around the unit, go to check on equipments, and then also working in synchronization with the folks that we call them inside operators who have displays about having a lot of sensors that monitor if a specific unit is doing well, or a specific equipment need attentions and so forth. So they work in synchronization with the outside operators to make sure that everything is running well, and all the work that need to be done all get done properly. So that's kind of like in day-to-day plant operation. That's what we have, the inside operators and the outside operators that work together as a team in managing, plant operation that is applicable to a refinery or a chemical manufacturer facility. So some of the challenges that we have is that, right, how do you train all these operators, right, the inside operators and the outside operators? So as some of you probably kind of pick up in your experience in learning new things. So typically, like when we are being lectured on and you don't participate in any of the discussions, so you learn very little and you remember very little. And then if you actually do some reading on a new thing, on new stuff, and then you maybe learn a bit, maybe 10-15%. And then if you look at some audio and visual stuff, then maybe you may retain 20% of what you learn from the audio sessions or a video session. And then if you whatever new area that you learn, right, somebody demonstrate how things work and all that in front of you, maybe you may retain 30% of what you learn over that session. And then if instead you bring it to the next step where you actively participate, we promote, right, the trainees to involve in discussions and so forth, asking questions and all that, then maybe the trainee may retain 50% about what they learned during the training class. And then if you give them the opportunity to practice what they learn, that's where they remember a lot of stuff, like in on average around 75%. You can personally kind of relate to that in the sense that, for example, if you are driving somebody in a going somewhere in a car, and you're just following what the GPS is telling you. Right nowadays we all use GPS, but then one day if you don't have the GPS, you're kind of at a loss at how to go from point A to point B, right? if you rely strictly on the GPS telling you where to turn left, where to turn right, where to exit, right? So it's just kind of similar types of learning experience many of us have. And then also, what the industry has been doing is that, right, without technology that allow us to create a sandbox environment for the operators to practice. So all we're able to do is pretty much all the way up to about the discussion level. So the effectiveness of the training is not very, not very good. So then at the end of this, at the discussion training, then typically the trainees will shadow an experienced operator, and then they will work with them in plant operation, right? Both inside or outside operators. And then as you probably can tell, right, what you learn depending on what happened during the shadowing period, right? So we are not going to go through certain scenario of an actual operating facility just for the sake of training, right? So in the manufacturing facility, it's very difficult to do that, to give the operator the experience of, like, let's say, an equipment failure, for example. So that's very difficult. So many of us in the industry, we have been looking for better ways of training our operators, both inside and outside. So as part of effort, so what we, what the industry has done is that we have started creating what we now call digital twin, essentially what we call them training simulator. Essentially, we built a computer model that represent the actual physical process unit at a manufacturing facility. And then we have the actual equipment, just like an actual plant equipment that the operator use to operate to manage the plant. And then we have an interface that would allow the trainer to act like, hey, when the trainee asks for, hey, I need you to go to check if a piece of equipment is running or not, then this trainer can then go to an interface, what we call a trainer's graphics. Then they can perform some outside operations that are done by outside operator in this training environment. Although in this picture, I'm just showing you just a green box of a computer. In reality, there are many virtual machine that are running on this big computers here. I guess nowadays many of you are probably familiar with the virtual world, right? So in creating this training simulator, we do have probably in the orders of 6 to 10 this kind of virtual machine per simulator. So there are a lot of computing going on behind the scene in creating this kind of a training environment that allow the trainees to actually practice what they learn during the course of the training in a sandbox, essentially. And what are the key things that allow us to make this environment available and to all trainees? That some of the important things that are very critical in the success of this, in the use of the training simulator, is that not like the real world, right? The real world, time is just matching forward, right? You cannot pause and say, hey, wait a minute, I need a 5-minute break, right? I need to understand what I'm doing here in step 8. So in the training simulator, well, you can pause the simulation, maybe discuss with your trainer. Can you tell me a bit more? Why do I need to make this step now? And then have a discussion, right? And then because you can also pause, and then it is also possible to rewind, right? Oh, let us go back to where you first make the wrong move. That's why this piece of equipment is not happy with you now. This particular temperature is too high. So you can sort of kind of rewind back to where things are still going well before a certain event happened, right? So you can repeat the practice and try it again to perfect your skill in managing a certain situation. So essentially what we're doing is we're creating a sandbox for inside and outside operator that need to learn about a specific, how to manage a process unit at a refinery, be it a unit that makes gasoline or making diesel. So we're making a sandbox for them. So you probably remember, right? So the recent event that happened in a in Denver, Colorado, where a UA flight that was leaving from Denver to Hawaii, and then the one of the engine failed, right? And then the pilot had to make an emergency landing back to the airport, right? So luckily, right, no, the all the people were safe and so forth. But then, right, just like what we're doing in the manufacturing facility, all the airline pilots, all of them have to go through very strict flight simulator training. So I'm pretty sure that the pilot on that particular day, that pilot probably practiced the emergency landing with one engine running for many times. So that was not the first time that pilot have to go through that experience. So that's kind of what we are trying to do, very similar to what the airline industry is doing, is creating a sandbox for 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 operators so that they can go through and learn the procedures, and particularly the not the typical, right, and the normal things that happen around the process unit. We give them the opportunity to experience things that don't normally happen. So when they see them, they have confidence that they can manage the event safely. And bringing in, right, another aspect to the training is that, as I explained earlier, is that the trainer would typically then, without a 3D model, right? So typically a trainer will just be working in synchronization with the trainee, providing some coachings and then explaining how the process works. And then the trainer will go to use the the trainer's graphics to make some moves that are typically made by the outside operator, right? It could be just turning on a piece of equipment, or turning off a piece of equipment, or go to read a local reading that say, hey, yeah, at the operator may see that, hey, I see that on my computer display, the temperature at a certain location of a unit is kind of high. Can you confirm that the local reading also is reading high, right? Just kind of want to make sure that what we're seeing on a computer is actually correct. So that kind of things are typically done by the trainer, basically representing typically things that are done by the outside operators. If now we add in a 3D model, right? So then the 3D model will be able to be used by another operator that participate in the whole training, and then this person then could perform the outside operation instead of the trainer. And then this particular person does not necessarily have to be in the same room, and this person could be in a separate location, and then they could do like what we typically do in real life, is that, right, there will be radio communication between the inside operator and the outside operator. So that's where the 3D model bring in a lot of things that are not possible, to bring that very close to the actual real life experience. Meaning that, right, like, when without the 3D model, for example, so when the trainee asks for a asks for a piece of equipment that he or she needs, right, that the outside person need to go there and turn it on, in without the 3D model, typically, right, that would happen very quickly. The trainer just go back to, just maybe walk maybe about 6 feet away, and then got onto a computer and then turn a piece of equipment on. That may happen like in 30 seconds, right? But then with the use of the 3D model, depending on where where the outside operator is to do that task, right, it may take 5 minutes, because you have to physically walk from one place to another, right? So that's kind of one of the beauty that we have with the use of the 3D model. And you may have questions about, like, right, how do you actually build this? What does it take to build this 3D model? Obviously, as you guys, many of you have experience in playing games and all that. So obviously the equipment that we use to host a 3D model has to have very fast graphics card and all that, so that when you walk around the unit, you feel kind of real and all that. So the typical interface that we use is more or less like what you could see in the marketplace nowadays. You could use the kind of like a headset and then a remote device, right? So very immersive. You sort of kind of living in the world, walking around the unit, just like just like how you walk in the actual unit. Or you could use just like when you play a game like on an Xbox, right, or a PlayStation 3, a PlayStation 4. So this is just kind of like, looking at a computer screen that would allow you to walking around the unit, and then you could interact with different pieces of the process equipment, and then you can turn certain thing on and turn certain thing off and so forth. So those are the two primary interfaces that we use for the 3D model. So in a nutshell, so once you have a 3D models, then obviously many of us can use, would use the 3D model to just kind of learn the locations of process equipment, like where they are located and how long it would take from one area to another. And as you probably can guess too, is that sometime, right? Like for example, if I'm going to, we have a new person joining the team, and that person trying to learn the locations of different pieces of equipment, right? So then now outside is minus 20 degree F, right? It may not be quite comforting just to go there and walk around with snow and so forth. But now the new trainee could use a 3D model, just walk around the unit, get himself or herself are familiar with a lot of the different key equipment that they have to work with. So, and then also that also allows you that, hey, as I was showing you, is that the manufacturing facility sometimes it's not just all on the ground, right? Some equipment is on the first floor and second deck and third floor, things like that. And then there are certain area that you have the stair, and there are certain areas you don't have the stair. So you kind of learn some of the routing that you have to go through in order to go from one place to another. And then also the other beauty is allowing us to coordinate the training of the inside operator and the outside operator, bringing all together, working as a team in performing certain operations around the unit. So overall, I mean, this area of integrating 3D model with training simulator is still very new. We started working on this just a few years back, and then tested a few system and so forth. So far has been very encouraging. Obviously, it's new technology and it requires a lot of high power computer. And obviously, right, one thing that I forgot to mention is that, right, when we right in this area when we build the 3D model, so there are a lot of computer science and technology that we are using. And then one thing I forgot to mention is that when we built the process digital twin, that right, like the process equipment that let's say represent a unit that make gasolines or make diesel, obviously we are using a lot of the chemistries and physics and math that you learned at high school, and maybe engineering stuff at high school and university. So all that are very important in creating this environment that we could use in training both inside and outside operators. So it's just a very important for us to be able to continuously have the the capability of having this environment in training both inside and outside operators. Just to give you a view of like, so that you could feel for exactly how it looks like from so on the left hand side of the picture is the actual unit, and then on the right hand side, this is the virtual 3D model of that actual unit that we have built. Just kind of give you a feel for, you will see that the coloring is a bit different and all that. You may be wondering why. Some of the colorings, we use that coloring for the piping, just mainly to indicate what kind of material is in the piping, so that it's facilitate the training. Obviously in real life, as you could see on the left hand pictures, there is everything looks more or less like same color. So when we build the 3D model, there are certain design decision that we can make in terms of what color we want to use. Maybe it makes a lot more sense if we use certain color, so that it's a lot easier to conduct the training and so forth. And overall, right, so the 3D model, to build a 3D model involves not just you know looking at plan drawing. It involves a lot of picture taking. So for a project that I work on, I took many thousands of pictures to build the 3D model in order to build it really very nicely replicate of what we have in the actual unit. Okay, so that's kind of give you a quick tours about like what we are doing in terms of using, computer model, what we call digital twin, and then integrated with a 3D models to provide a sandbox that we could use for operator that they could go through any kind of potential emergency scenario that we're not able to provide in the real world because right, we expect our plan to run reliably, day in and day out. And then, in the event that certain thing is not working well, or in the event of an emergency, we hope that, right, so all the operators have the confidence since they have been trained in this kind of environment where they know how to manage that kind of event with a lot of confidence. So are we getting a lot of questions that I need to answer, Christina?
Gotten any questions in the chat, but I have to say your presentation was amazing. That was super interesting to learn about. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask? I do have a question coming from Chloe. What advice would you give to someone learning how to make 3D models?
Yeah, I think the use of the 3D models, obviously it's very new, right? As you know, that the game industry started out many years ago and all that. Obviously, if you're interested in learning more about, getting into this area of 3D model, definitely, computer science area will be something that you want to look into. And then, obviously, this, as every one of us know, is that right? It's the technology in computer science and then also in the area of graphics, they are not like your like the things that you learn like in high school in math, right? Like the Pythagoras theorems and all that. All those are true and say the same all the time, right? The thing with the computer technology is that things are changing very quickly. New technologies are coming on, and new computers that are running so fast and all that, that allows you to do a lot of things very efficiently as time goes on. Yeah, definitely. You want to look at like there are several software packages available in the industries, and depending on which one that you are interested in. But I think is that if you go to look for search for 3D model, like let's say for refinery or for chemical plant, I'm sure you'll see a lot of hit by that offered by several companies. So I think it's the key thing is that to work in this area. So computer science is very important. So you'll be working with computer most of the time, and then getting to know those basic packages will be one of the key stepping stone in getting into this area.
Thanks for asking that question. That was a really good answer, Chloe. Really appreciated that. Does anyone else have anything they maybe want to add? It could just be a comment in general. I guess to go off that, I can maybe add a little bit. When you're as a college student, right now I'm currently doing like MATLAB coding, but I've also now I'm expanding to different languages such as like Python or Java. So as you go through your college experience, you'll definitely run into many different experiences that'll bring you to hopefully set you up to work on something like 3D models. But for now, my main focus is MATLAB. If you were wondering about those kinds of like coding and computer aspects.
Yeah, I can add like on top of what Christina just shared is that right. So even though at work, I don't, we don't use MATLAB every day, but we do use MATLAB in as part of the work process that we use to for certain calculations and all that. So sometimes it's a challenge, right, for the professors at universities and all that to try to link in like, this is what you learn, and then this is what actually people are practicing in real life, right? So a lot of the time is the challenge of seeing how, depending on how you learn, right? Certain people, when they learn, they like to know in the end what is the end game. How do I use this thing called MATLAB to do to do what? So and then some folks, they are pretty okay with just learning, just from the assignments and the reading material. And then they, okay, I get it. I understand why I need to learn this, right? So it's a lot of combinations. So, but I think it's always good to, as you learn about new things, is always know a bit more about the end game. Like, hey, if I learn about this 3D software or this package called MATLAB, in the end, these are the things that I will be able to do.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that's the best part about engineering. You're always being exposed to different routes. It's never boring, at least not on my part. I'm always learning something new. We're not much.
Definitely, I could share that, right? I started out my career back in the early 90s working as a chemical engineer. I never imagined that I would have the opportunity, or even at that time, no one was talking about 3D model.
Oh yeah.
That, right? I didn't really, go over the years, then now started looking at training simulator and then looking at use of 3D models. And just kind of, I didn't mention that, the use of the 3D model conceptually, there are also a lot of things that are very similar, like uh, in terms of what people are doing in the medical industry as well, in the hospital and all that, right? So you have many doctors that treat rare diseases. So these kind of, don't, because they are rare, right? So they don't happen very often. So sometimes, for treatment of this kind of rare diseases, you have to go to surgery, right? So the doctor has to perform the surgery. Then this doctor may have performed the surgery maybe about 3 years ago or 5 years ago. So you kind of get a bit rusty, right, on how to do that kind of thing. So there are many research institute that kind of partner with Hollywood. Then they would create an environment for them to, with mannequins and all that, to make it so that they could practice what they have to do going through the procedure. And that makes it a lot more confidence, right, to the patients and the patient's family, right? Instead of telling the patients and the patient's family, you know what? We actually haven't done that for the last 2 years. You are the first one that we're going to do this, and that does not really foster a lot of confidence, right?
Yeah.